Welcome to the American Debunk, where we uncover the truth behind media-driven hoaxes using hoaxology. Today, we're tackling the January 6 protesters killed police hoax, a widely spread claim that protesters from the January 6th Capitol breach were responsible for killing police officers. This misinformation has been amplified by politicians, media outlets, and social media posts, but the facts paint a very different picture. The hoax began shortly after the January 6th riot, with reports suggesting that Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick died from injuries sustained during the event. Media outlets perpetuated this claim, presenting it as evidence of the protesters' violence. The narrative reached its peak on January 31st, 2024, when President Biden declared Trump, quote, "watch the cops being killed" during the Capitol riot. Headlines like these reinforced the hoax, creating the illusion of widespread violence by protesters that led to police deaths.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
Despite the widespread claims, no police officers were killed during the January 6 protests. While Officer Brian Sicknick tragically died the day after the riot, an investigation by the Washington, D.C. medical examiner determined he died of natural causes, a stroke, unrelated to any injuries from the protests. On April 19, 2021, the Associated Press reported the medical findings, concluding there was no evidence of trauma or external injuries to Officer Sicknick. The media then pivoted to other officers who died in the weeks and months after January 6th. However, these tragic deaths were suicides or unrelated medical events, and no direct link to the protests were ever established. Importantly, no criminal homicide charges were filed in relation to these deaths. A quick note before we proceed. At the American Debunk, we unequivocally condemn all political violence, including the actions of those who turned to violence on January 6th. However, we must also reject the narrative that falsely attributes police deaths to the protesters. To understand how this false narrative gained so much traction, we need to look at the deliberate techniques used to craft and spread the hoax. We do this using hoaxology. Strategic ambiguity blurred the lines between injuries, unrelated deaths, and events on January 6th. Media and politicians insinuated a connection between the protest and police deaths without explicitly stating it, allowing the narrative to persist without fully verifiable claims. Selective reporting amplified the hoax by focusing on the tragic deaths of officers without disclosing key facts. Headlines emphasize officer deaths while omitting the timelines and causes, such as natural causes and suicides occurring days or months later, misleading the public into believing protesters were directly responsible to killing the police officers on January 6th. When prominent figures like President Biden repeated the false claim that protesters killed police officers, the narrative gained credibility through an appeal to authority. By leveraging the president's stature, this misinformation seemed more legitimate, discouraging critical analysis or investigation by the public. The January 6 protesters killed police hoax is a perfect example of how strategic ambiguity, selective reporting, and appeal to authority can be used to create and perpetuate hoaxes. For more hoax breakdowns using hoaxology and the truth behind the media narratives, visit AmericanDebunk.com. Thanks for watching.